The mission begins. Alex was a young man with a quiet life, far from the excitement of space adventures. His days were spent working as an engineer for the Galactic Union, fixing ships and machines. But everything changed one ordinary morning when his communicator beeped loudly, breaking the silence of his office. The message was from his superior, Captain Renner, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense attitude. "Alex, report to the headquarters immediately." The message read, "You've been chosen for a special mission. Do not delay." His heart raced. It wasn't every day that someone from his rank was called for a mission, let alone one that required immediate attention. He grabbed his gear and made his way to the Galactic Union headquarters, wondering what he had gotten himself into. When he arrived, Captain Renner was waiting for him, her face serious and her arms crossed. She didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "Alex, this is a high-priority mission, and it's unlike anything you've ever done. The stakes are extremely high. You've been selected to travel to an alien planet called Zinthar. There's a unique species there, female aliens in a constant state of lactation. Their milk is extremely valuable, with properties that could save lives across the galaxy. Your task is to collect it." Alex blinked in disbelief. "Wait, you want me to milk them?" Captain Renner's gaze hardened. "That's correct. The Galactic Union needs this resource, and you're the one for the job. You'll be accompanied by a small team of scientists to assist with the process, but you'll be the one in direct contact with them. They're not dangerous, but they are highly intelligent. Approach them carefully and stay focused. There's a lot at stake." The thought of milking aliens felt wrong on so many levels, but Alex had learned not to question orders. He knew that the Galactic Union's motives were often driven by practical needs. If this milk could save countless lives, then perhaps the mission was justified, despite the awkwardness of it all. The journey to Zinthar was long and tedious. The crew aboard the ship was tight-lipped, most of them keeping to themselves. Only one scientist, Dr. Sylvia, seemed eager to talk. She was an expert in alien biology and had spent years studying different species. She would be Alex's guide on this mission, explaining the intricacies of the aliens' biology. "These beings, the Zinthar," Dr. Sylvia explained one evening during the trip, "they're unlike anything we've encountered before. They're not just physically different, but their social structures and understanding of life are completely foreign to us. They've evolved in ways that make them complex, but they're also remarkably docile. They have no aggressive instincts, so you shouldn't worry about your safety." Alex wasn't so sure. His mind kept circling back to the idea of milking an alien species. How would they react to him? Would they be willing to cooperate, or would he be met with anger or fear? After several days, the ship finally entered the atmosphere of Zinthar. As they landed, the landscape outside the window looked otherworldly. Towering, colorful plants, and strange rock formations stretched as far as the eye could see. The air smelled sweet, almost intoxicating, and the sun cast a warm, golden glow across the land. The team gathered their equipment, and Alex felt his nerves tighten. This was it. He was about to step foot on an alien planet and interact with beings who were unlike anything he had ever seen. When they disembarked, the first thing Alex noticed was the silence. There was no noise, no hum of life, just stillness. And then, out of the silence, they appeared, the Zinthar. They were tall, with shimmering skin that glowed faintly in the sunlight. Their features were delicate but striking. Their large eyes, filled with intelligence, stared at Alex and the team without fear. There were no words exchanged, only the soft hum of their communication. The Zinthar communicated telepathically, a silent transfer of thoughts and emotions. Alex stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. But then, one of the Zinthar stepped forward, a tall female with silver-colored skin and piercing violet eyes. She regarded Alex with calm curiosity, tilting her head as if waiting for him to make the first move. Dr. Sylvia broke the silence. This is Elijah, the leader of this group. She will be your main point of contact." Alex stepped forward slowly, trying to mask the unease he felt. Hello," he said, unsure of how to address the alien. Elijah's mind brushed against his, and suddenly he felt a rush of emotions. Curiosity, a hint of amusement, and something else, a kind of understanding. She was not hostile, but she was not entirely welcoming either. "You're here for the milk." Elijah's voice echoed in Alex's mind, the words clear but distant. "We know why you're here." Alex nodded awkwardly. "Yes, I'm here to help. To collect the milk." Elijah did not respond immediately, instead studying Alex carefully. The silence stretched out, and Alex felt an uncomfortable weight pressing down on him. He didn't know what she was thinking, but something told him that this wasn't going to be as simple as he had hoped. "Come," Elijah finally said, turning and gesturing for Alex to follow. "We will show you." As Alex walked behind her, he couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. He had come here to do a job, but now, surrounded by the strange beings of Zinthar, everything felt much more complicated than he had imagined. What lay ahead would challenge his beliefs, his morality, and everything he thought he knew about the universe. The mission had only just begun, and already the questions were multiplying. Would he succeed? Or was there something more to this mission than he could ever have imagined? First contact. As the Zinthar led Alex and the team deeper into their territory, the landscape grew more surreal. The towering plants were not just static. They moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though the entire planet was alive, breathing in time with the universe itself. The air smelled thick with sweet fragrances, mingling with the faint scent of something metallic, a reminder that this was no ordinary planet. Alex could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His feet felt heavy as he followed Elijah through the lush terrain. His mind raced with questions. What would the Zinthar think of him? Would they see him as a stranger, an outsider? Or would they accept him as one of their own? He had no idea what to expect from this first real interaction. All he knew was that the mission was more important than ever. The Union had invested too much into this to back up now. Elijah led them to a large clearing where several other Zinthar stood, waiting. Unlike the women Alex had seen on the ship, these aliens were different. They were more radiant, their skin glowing brightly under the planet's twin suns. Their eyes were large, reflective pools of light that seemed to see right through him. The entire group was entirely silent, their gazes heavy, yet full of curiosity. At the center of the clearing, Alex saw what he had only heard about in briefings, the large, translucent bioorganic structure that seemed to pulse with an internal rhythm. It looked like a tree, but unlike any Alex had ever seen. Its bark was smooth and shimmering, almost like it was made of liquid crystal, and large flower-like petals opened at the top, releasing a soft, radiant glow. The Zinthar around it were positioned in a circle, their hands reaching out, their voices nothing but a hum of quiet telepathic communication. "This is where we gather." Elijah's voice entered Alex's mind, smooth but firm. "The milk, the essence of life for our people, comes from us. But it is not just a substance. It is a part of us. You must understand, human, that this is sacred." Alex felt a shiver crawl up his spine. The thought of harvesting something so personal from these beings felt more invasive than he had imagined. He was no stranger to the concept of resources, but this was something far deeper. He was about to take something that was, in essence, a part of their life force. The moral dilemma twisted in his gut, but he kept his expression neutral. The Zinthar moved with grace and precision, their movements fluid and synchronized. Alex had never seen anything quite like it before. Their collective unity was almost hypnotic. He stood there, unsure of what to do next. He had been given the mission to collect the milk, but now, with this surreal first contact, he began to feel the full weight of the responsibility. As he stood there, Dr. Sylvia stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, it's time to begin. We need to collect the first samples. Follow my lead, and remember, these beings are highly sensitive to emotions. Keep your mind clear." Alex nodded, though his heart beat faster than ever. The thought of milking these alien beings had seemed like a simple task in the briefing room. But now, standing in the middle of the Zinthar's sacred ground, the situation felt overwhelmingly complex. These were not simple creatures. They were intelligent, conscious beings, and he wasn't sure how to approach them in a way that would respect their dignity and their culture. Elijah's voice echoed again in his mind, breaking his thoughts. "Do not worry, human. We know what you need to do. We will allow you to proceed." The Zinthar parted slightly, making way for Alex to approach one of the females standing nearby. She was tall, with shimmering, lavender-colored skin and eyes that seemed too large to belong to any creature he had ever encountered. Her expression was calm, yet her eyes held an emotion that Alex couldn't quite place. Resignation, maybe, or perhaps something deeper. The alien girl extended her hand toward him, and Alex took a cautious step forward. Her touch was cool against his skin, but it sent a ripple of warmth through his body. Her thoughts brushed against his mind like a gentle breeze, and Alex could feel her own hesitance. This wasn't just an alien creature. She was a being with thoughts, emotions, and perhaps fears of her own. He couldn't help but wonder what she thought of this situation. "Do you understand?" Elijah asked, her voice quiet, yet full of authority. "This is not something to be taken lightly. It is a bond, a giving." Alex nodded, though his mind was a whirlwind. "I understand," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He glanced down at the apparatus in his hands, a sleek, organic device that the Zinthar had designed to collect the milk. It was made from the same translucent material as the tree, with vines and tendrils that seemed to pulse with energy. The Zinthar female before him looked at him patiently, as if she were waiting for him to make the first move. With a deep breath, Alex positioned the device. The moment his hands made contact with the alien's body, a surge of warmth flooded his senses. It wasn't just physical. It felt like a mental connection, a deepening understanding between them. He could feel her emotions, her fear, her confusion, and perhaps a trace of sadness. For a moment, he hesitated. The moral weight of what he was doing was almost unbearable. But then, he reminded himself of the importance of the mission. The Union needed this resource. People were counting on him. The device activated, and the process began. The Zinthar's milk, a glowing bioluminescent fluid, flowed into the container with a soft, steady rhythm. It was as if the act was natural, almost sacred. Alex's mind was overwhelmed by the emotions that now flooded in from the alien. He could feel her compliance, but also her sorrow. She didn't want to give this up, but she had no choice. This was their way. As the container filled, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was violating something precious, something sacred. The soft hum of the Zinthar's telepathic communication echoed in his mind, almost as if they were whispering to each other. What did they think of him? Did they view him as an intruder, or was he just another tool in their strange, ritualistic process? When the collection was complete, Alex stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The Zinthar seemed to take no notice of the device as it was detached from their body. They simply stood in their calm, eerie silence. Elijah's voice entered his mind again, soft but firm. "The process is done. You may take what you have come for." But Alex wasn't sure he could just take it. Not without understanding more. Not without considering the price that had been paid for it. Cultural tension. The days that followed were a blur of routine and unsettling moments. Alex and the team remained stationed in the heart of the Zinthar territory, surrounded by their glowing organic architecture. Each day, Alex collected more of the bioluminescent milk, following the same ritualistic process with the Zinthar women. But the unease never left him. The moral weight of the task seemed to grow heavier with every passing moment. As the team continued to work, Alex found himself drifting further from his original purpose. The initial curiosity he'd felt about these beings had given way to something more profound. Every time he came into contact with the Zinthar, a deeper understanding of their culture and way of life began to take root in his mind. It wasn't just their bodies that were extraordinary, it was their very existence. In the evenings, when the work was done, and the team gathered in their makeshift quarters, Alex often found himself staring out at the alien landscape. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows across the crystalline trees and plants that seemed to glow with an inner light. The stars, brighter than he had ever seen, twinkled in the sky like an endless ocean of possibilities. And yet, despite the beauty of it all, there was a strange, unsettling feeling that gnawed at him. A feeling that he was violating something sacred. One evening, after another long day of harvesting, Alex found himself alone in the clearing where he had first met Alicia. The soft hum of telepathic communication filled the air, as though the planet itself was alive with the thoughts of its inhabitants. He could hear the Zinthar speaking among themselves, but their words were a blur, unintelligible to his human mind. Yet, as he stood there, Alicia appeared again, her glowing form shimmering softly in the twilight. "You seem troubled," she said, her voice clear in his mind. "Why do you not rest, human?" Alex was startled by her sudden appearance, but he quickly masked his surprise. "I just needed some air," he said, trying to sound casual. But Alicia's piercing violet eyes didn't miss a thing. She could sense his discomfort, his inner turmoil. He could feel it, like a soft pressure against his thoughts. "You are troubled by the task you have been given," Alicia said, her voice soft but firm. "You feel it is wrong. You feel as though you are taking something from us." Alex swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't know. I came here to do my job. But every time I collect the milk, it feels like I'm doing something I shouldn't. It's like I'm taking something that doesn't belong to me." Alicia remained silent for a moment, her large eyes gazing at him with an intensity that seemed to see straight through him. Then she stepped closer, her form radiating a soft, ethereal glow. "You are not the first to feel this way, human," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The first time any of our kind was harvested, there was a great sadness among our people. The bond that exists between us and our milk is ancient, sacred. It is a part of our essence, our very being. And to have it taken, without our will, is a wound that never fully heals." Alex's chest tightened as her words hit him like a hammer. He had heard whispers from Dr. Sylvia about the alien species' complex culture, but he hadn't fully grasped the depth of it until now. The Zinthar weren't just creatures. They were a sentient species with emotions, histories, and values, and their milk was not a mere product. It was a part of their soul, their essence. "But we need it," Alex said, his voice shaky. "The milk. People are dying. The Galactic Union is counting on it." Alicia's gaze softened, and for a moment, Alex thought he saw something like compassion in her eyes. "We know. We understand your plight. Our milk has the power to heal, to sustain life. But we are not a commodity. We are not your tools to be used for your gain. We are a people, with our own will, our own choice." Alex's mind raced. He could feel her words sinking in, pulling at his conscience. He had thought of the Zinthar as a resource, something to be exploited for the greater good. But now, standing before one of them, feeling the weight of her thoughts, he realized how wrong he had been. You have a choice," he asked, his voice barely a whisper. He hadn't thought to ask. In his mind, the Zinthar had always been a means to an end, a way to fulfill the Union's goals. But now he was faced with the truth. They were living beings, capable of making their own decisions. Alicia nodded slowly. "We can choose to give. We can choose to share. But you must understand, human, it is a choice, and that choice cannot be forced." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent so many days simply following orders, never questioning the mission. Now, for the first time, he realized that the mission was not as clear-cut as it seemed. The Zinthar were not just creatures to be harvested. They were individuals, and he had been asked to take something from them that was deeply personal, something that could not be returned. "How do you feel about this?" Alex asked, his voice full of uncertainty. "About us taking your milk." Alicia's expression remained calm, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "We do what we must as you do, but we do not do so lightly. Every time our milk is taken, it takes a part of us, and we grow weaker with each collection. But we do it because we have no choice, just as you do what you must, for the greater good." Alex felt a pang of guilt. He had always believed in the idea of sacrifice for the greater good, but now he wasn't so sure. The greater good was an abstract concept, but these beings, these Zinthar, were not abstract. They were real. They were alive. And every time he collected their milk, he was taking a piece of them, a piece that might never be replaced. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Alex whispered, his voice raw with emotion. Alicia reached out, her cool fingers brushing against his arm. "You must do what you believe is right, human. But understand this, the choice is not only yours, it is ours as well." Her words lingered in Alex's mind long after she had left. He stood there, in the center of the clearing, alone with his thoughts. The stars above twinkled as if watching over him, and for the first time, Alex wondered if the galaxy itself had been waiting for him to realize the truth. The mission was never as simple as it seemed. There was a price to be paid for everything, a price that could not be measured in milk, or in credits, or in lives saved. It was a price paid in dignity, in respect, and in the choices of those who had no voice in the matter. Alex wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain. The journey ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. Unforeseen consequences. As the days passed, the mission grew more complex. What Alex had initially believed to be a straightforward task, harvesting the Zinthar's milk, had become a moral labyrinth that seemed to have no clear solution. Each time he completed the process, the unease in his stomach deepened. Despite his commitment to the Galactic Union and the lives that could be saved with the milk, Alex couldn't ignore the growing tension in his mind. There was something deeply wrong with what was happening, and the more he learned about the Zinthar, the more it troubled him. The Zinthar women, though still cooperating, had become noticeably quieter and more withdrawn as the days wore on. At first, Alex had chalked it up to their natural stoicism, but soon it became clear that something else was at play. The once vibrant, shimmering figures seemed to lose their glow, their skin dulling slightly, their eyes clouding with a heaviness that wasn't there before. It was subtle, but to someone who spent every day interacting with them, it was impossible to miss. One evening, after another long session of harvesting, Alex found himself alone in the clearing once again, wrestling with the gnawing doubts that had come to define his thoughts. The air was thick with the same sweet fragrance that had first overwhelmed him upon arrival, but tonight there was a strange metallic undertone to it. He couldn't explain it, but it made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Suddenly, a figure approached from the shadows. It was Elijah, her silhouette glowing faintly in the twilight, but something was different about her this time. Her usually calm and serene expression was now tinged with something darker, a deep sadness that seemed to weigh her down. "Alex," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "We need to speak." Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had expected this moment in some form, but now that it had come, he didn't know what to say. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice strained. "The others, they don't seem the same. What's going on?" Alicia's gaze dropped to the ground, as if ashamed. "Our people are suffering. We cannot keep giving without consequences." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Suffering. But the milk, it's healing. It's saving lives across the galaxy. What do you mean? "We give," Alicia continued, Because we have no choice. The union needs it, and we must comply. But each time, it takes something more from us. Our milk is tied to our vitality. When you take it, you take a part of our life force, our essence. At first, we could endure. But now, we are beginning to feel the toll. Alex's mind raced. He had known there would be consequences, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. The Zinthar weren't just giving a part of their bodies. They were giving a piece of their very life, their soul, and with each collection, they were weakening. "But you've never said anything," Alex said, his voice a mixture of guilt and frustration. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? Why let us continue?" Elijah's eyes met his, and for the first time, Alex saw the full weight of the sorrow that she carried. "We told you," she said softly, "but you did not listen. You came here thinking you were simply collecting a resource. You did not ask. You did not understand." Alex felt the sting of her words. She was right. He had been so focused on the mission, so blinded by the union's need for the milk, that he had never stopped to think about the Zinthar as beings with their own lives, their own pain. They weren't just vessels for healing. They were people, and he had been taking from them without considering the cost. "But it's not just us," Elijah continued, her voice growing weaker. "The milk itself, it is not just a simple resource. There is something deeper in it, something ancient. It was never meant to be harvested in this way. We were never meant to be drained like this, and now we feel the consequences more than ever." Alex felt his heart race. "What do you mean? What's happening to you?" Elijah took a slow, deep breath, as if summoning the strength to continue. "We are not like you. Our bodies are connected to the energy of the planet itself. We draw life from it, just as the planet draws life from the stars. But the more we give, the more disconnected we become from that energy. It is not just physical. It is spiritual. And we are beginning to lose our connection to everything that sustains us. Soon, we will no longer be able to heal or even survive. We will fade into nothingness." Alex stared at her, his mind spinning with this new revelation. This wasn't just about the union's needs anymore. This was about the very survival of the Zinthar. He had thought that the milk was simply a powerful resource, but now he understood that it was a lifeline for their entire species, and with every harvest, they were giving away a piece of their very existence, slowly eroding their connection to the world around them. "But why didn't you stop us?" Alex asked, his voice strained with confusion and guilt. "Why didn't you tell the Union about this before it was too late?" Elijah's gaze shifted to the sky, her face full of sorrow. "We tried," she said quietly, "but we were afraid of what the Union would do to us if we refused. We feared retaliation, and so we allowed it to happen. We believed that if we gave enough, you would stop, that we could save the galaxy and ourselves at the same time. But now, we are beyond that. We cannot continue this way." The weight of her words settled heavily on Alex's shoulders. He had never imagined the scale of the consequences. It wasn't just about taking milk. It was about taking their very essence, their future. They had been sacrificing everything, and for what? To save lives. To fulfill the Union's needs. But what about them? What about the Zinthar? "We can't keep doing this," Alex said finally, his voice breaking. "I can't. It's wrong." Elijah nodded, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I am glad you understand, human. It is time for this to end." But as Alex turned to leave, he knew that ending the harvest wouldn't be so simple. The Union was counting on the milk, and they wouldn't stop just because the Zinthar had voiced their concerns. Alex had to make a choice that would change everything. The weight of his decision pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. What would happen if he refused? What would happen if he chose to protect the Zinthar over the Union's demands? The future felt uncertain, and the stakes were higher than ever. The truth revealed. The night was heavy with silence as Alex stood there, alone in the clearing, the weight of Elijah's words echoing in his mind. Every step he took felt like it carried the burden of countless lives, both human and Zinthar. The Galactic Union had placed a monumental responsibility on his shoulders, but now, Alex could no longer ignore the truth that had been laid bare before him. The Zinthar were not just a resource to be harvested. They were living, breathing beings with their own will, and he had been part of an operation that was slowly but surely destroying them. As the hours passed, Alex wrestled with his thoughts. He had been raised with the belief that the Union's goals were noble, that they had the greater good in mind, and that their actions were justified by the outcomes. But standing there, in the midst of a species that was clearly in distress, he began to question everything he had ever believed. He had to make a choice, one that would have consequences for the Zinthar, the Union, and for himself. The next morning, Alex made his decision. He would stop the harvest. It wasn't just about the milk. It was about the Zinthar's survival. It was about doing what was right, even if it meant defying the Union. There was no turning back now. But the road ahead was far from simple. As he made his way to the camp, he found Dr. Sylvia already waiting for him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes narrowed as she saw the determination in his stance. "Alex," she said softly, "you're making a dangerous choice. If you refuse to comply with the Union's orders, they won't take kindly to it. You've seen how they operate." Alex's heart raced at the thought of defying the Union, but he couldn't stay silent anymore. "I know what I'm doing, Sylvia. The Zinthar are dying, and we're taking everything from them. I can't keep participating in this. We've been wrong, and I need to make it right." Dr. Sylvia's gaze softened for a moment, but then she sighed heavily. "I understand, but you need to know what this means. If you refuse, you'll be labeled a traitor. The Union won't forgive you, and they won't let you walk away unscathed. You'll become a target. The higher-ups won't tolerate insubordination." "I don't care anymore," Alex said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "What's the point of saving lives if we destroy others in the process?" Dr. Sylvia didn't respond immediately. She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing the risks herself. Finally, she nodded, albeit reluctantly. "I can't stop you, Alex, but know that what you're doing isn't just about saving the Zinthar. It's about the future of this entire galaxy. If the Union finds out about this, they'll react in ways you can't imagine." Alex didn't need to hear more. He had made up his mind. He wasn't going to be complicit in this any longer. But there was one thing left to do. He had to speak to the Zinthar, to Elysia, and tell them the truth. He found her in the clearing, as expected. She was standing alone, her glowing form almost ethereal against the backdrop of the alien landscape. She didn't turn when Alex approached, but he knew she felt his presence. "You've made your decision," Elysia said, her voice soft but steady. "You've chosen to stop the harvest." Alex nodded. "I can't keep doing this. It's wrong. You were right. The milk, it's a part of you, and we've been taking it without understanding what it costs you. The Union doesn't care about you. It never did." Elysia turned to face him then, her violet eyes full of a deep, quiet sadness. "It is a hard decision, human. But you must understand, the Union is not the only force at work here. You are not just dealing with a simple political entity. There are powers beyond your comprehension, forces that have kept us trapped in this cycle for eons. The Union is but one piece in a much larger puzzle." Alex's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about? What other forces? What else is going on?" Elysia's gaze grew distant, as if lost in the echoes of her people's history. "We are not the only ones who have been exploited like this. Our kind has been harvested before, by others who sought to use our milk for their own purposes. But the true power lies in the milk itself. It is not just a healing substance. It holds something far more ancient. The essence of our entire race is contained within it, and there are those who seek to control that essence." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Who are these people? And why hasn't the Union told us about this?" Elysia took a deep breath, her face somber. "The Union is just a tool in this larger game. They are part of the system that has been manipulating us for centuries, unaware of the true consequences of their actions. But they are not the only ones who know the power of our milk. There are ancient forces, beyond the Union's control, that have been watching us. They have been using the Union as a pawn, quietly pushing for the harvesting to continue. They are the ones who benefit the most from it. Alex felt the ground shift beneath him. He had thought the Union was the ultimate authority, that they had been acting in the best interests of the galaxy. But now, it was clear that they were just one piece in a much darker puzzle. The true danger was not just the Union's exploitation of the Zinthar, but the larger forces pulling the strings behind the scenes. But why hasn't anyone told us about this? Why didn't you warn us sooner? Alex asked, his voice rising with frustration. We could not, Elijah replied quietly. Our people have been silenced for too long. We were kept in the dark, controlled by those who sought to use us. We have no power to fight back. Until now. Alex's mind was reeling. The Zinthar were not just victims of the Union's greed. They were caught in a much larger web of manipulation. The galaxy was being controlled by forces that cared nothing for the lives of individual species. This wasn't just about stopping the harvest. It was about breaking free from the chains that had bound the Zinthar for centuries. Elijah's gaze grew more intense, as though she had made a decision of her own. There is one way to end this, Alex, but it will not be easy. If you want to stop the harvesting, if you want to save us, you must act quickly. The Union will come for you once they realize you've stopped. But there is something we can do to ensure the milk no longer holds power. We can sever the connection between our essence and the galaxy's power structures. We have a way to break free. Alex's eyes widened in shock. What do you mean? How? Elijah's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. We have waited for this moment for centuries. The power to end it all is within us. But we need your help, Alex. Together, we can destroy the system that has kept us enslaved. The truth was finally revealed. The Zinthar weren't just passive victims. They had a power that could disrupt the entire galactic system. But it came with a cost. To break free, to sever their connection to the milk and the power it provided, would require an unimaginable sacrifice. Alex knew what he had to do. He had no choice but to stand with the Zinthar. But the question remained, would the rest of the galaxy be ready to accept the consequences of this revelation? Would they understand the price of freedom? Or would they fight to maintain the status quo? The stakes had never been higher, and the road ahead would be more dangerous than Alex could ever have imagined. The truth had been revealed, and now everything was at risk. A desperate decision. The weight of Elijah's revelation settled like a storm cloud over Alex's mind. The Zinthar had always been viewed as a resource, a means to an end for the Union's ambitions. But now, as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Alex realized the truth was far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. The Union wasn't just exploiting the Zinthar. They were pawns in a much larger game, one that stretched far beyond the reach of galactic politics. Elijah had spoken of forces that had controlled the Zinthar for centuries, powers that had kept them trapped in a cycle of giving, draining them of their very essence. The Union, unwittingly or not, had been part of that system, and Alex had been a cog in the machine, taking what was never meant to be taken. But now, with the truth laid bare, he could no longer stand by. The Zinthar were offering him a way to break free from this system, to sever their connection to the forces that sought to exploit them. The question was, could he make the decision in time? The clock was ticking. The Galactic Union would not let this go. They had already invested too much in the Zinthar's milk, and they would stop at nothing to secure it. They needed it, not just for medical purposes, but for the political leverage it provided. The healing properties of the milk were unparalleled, capable of saving entire populations from disease, injury, and even death. And the Union, as powerful as it was not a body that liked to be defied. The moment Alex refused to comply, the Union would come after him. They wouldn't just be angry. They would destroy him. They would destroy anyone who stood in their way. As Alex stood there, surrounded by the alien landscape of Zinthar, his thoughts raced. Elysia had spoken of a way to sever the connection, a way to break the chains that had bound her people for so long. But to do so would require more than just a change in action. It would require an irreversible choice, one that could cost the Zinthar their connection to their own life force, their very essence. And it would certainly cost Alex everything he had worked for. His career, his standing with the Union, his future, they would all be gone. But as he looked into Elysia's eyes, he knew what he had to do. He had come to Zinthar with one mission in mind: to collect the milk. But now, the true mission had revealed itself. He wasn't here to collect a resource. He was here to free a people, to stop the exploitation of the Zinthar, and to stop the Union from continuing their destructive path. But this decision was not his alone to make. The Zinthar had waited for centuries for someone like him to come along, someone who might be able to help them. But they, too, had their doubts. Severing the connection would be a monumental sacrifice, not just for them, but for the galaxy as a whole. The milk was a vital resource, one that could change the fate of countless beings. To give it up, to stop producing it, could mean the loss of a powerful tool that could heal and protect so many. Alex, Elysia said, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. The choice you make will determine the future of our people, but it will also determine the future of your galaxy. If you choose to stop the harvest, to cut off the milk, it will be a wound to us, one that we may not be able to recover from. Our life force is tied to the milk. To stop it, to sever the bond, it may mean the end of us, but it may also mean the end of the exploitation. Alex swallowed hard. The weight of Elysia's words was crushing. The Zinthar had already given so much, and yet they had more to give. But the price was too steep. If he allowed this to continue, if he let the Union keep taking, there might be nothing left of the Zinthar. They would wither, fade away, and become little more than a memory. Are you ready to make that sacrifice? Elysia asked, her gaze unwavering. Can you live with the consequences? Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He had spent so much of his life following orders, doing what was expected of him. But now, in this moment, he realized that doing what was expected would mean the death of an entire species. He couldn't be part of that. He couldn't live with that on his conscience. I'm ready, Alex said quietly, his voice firm. We have to end this. We have to stop the Union from exploiting you. It's time to sever the connection, no matter the cost. Elysia nodded, her expression unreadable. Then we must act quickly. The Union will not take kindly to this. They will come for us. For you. You must prepare for the consequences. Alex knew what she meant. The Union would not simply let him walk away. They had built their entire strategy around the Zinthar, and they would fight tooth and nail to maintain control over the milk. If Alex went through with this, he would be branded a traitor, an enemy of the Union. He would become a fugitive. But the choice was clear. He couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Elysia led Alex to a hidden temple deep within the heart of the Zinthar's sacred land. It was a place the Union had never discovered, a place where the Zinthar had kept their most ancient secrets. The temple was carved into the rock, its walls lined with symbols that Alex couldn't decipher. There, deep within, lay the mechanism that would sever their connection to the galaxy's power structures. This is the heart of our people, Elysia said as they entered the chamber. Here, we are connected to the planet, to the stars. But here, too, is the power to break the bond. The mechanism you must activate will disrupt the flow of energy from our milk to the galaxy. It will destroy the link between us and the Union's control. Alex's hand trembled as he approached the console. The mechanism was a series of intricate gears and glowing energy lines, ancient and yet undeniably advanced. He could feel the weight of it, the power to change everything. But as his fingers hovered over the controls, doubt crept in. What would happen to the galaxy if he did this? What would happen to the Zinthar? Would they survive without the milk? Or would they become mere shadows of their former selves? There was no time for second-guessing. The Union would be coming for them soon, and the longer he hesitated, the more they would risk. He took a deep breath and activated the mechanism. A low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath Alex's feet vibrated. The energy in the room seemed to shift, like the very planet was reacting to the change. The bond was being severed. Alex could feel it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, in the very fabric of the world around him. But with it came a great weight, a sense of finality. The Zinthar would no longer be bound to the Union, but the cost of this freedom would be higher than any of them could have anticipated. As the hum of the mechanism faded, Elysia looked at Alex, her eyes full of gratitude, but also sadness. It is done. The bond is broken. Alex took a step back, his heart pounding. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The fight for the Zinthar's survival had only just begun. The Union would come, and when they did, Alex would have to decide where his true loyalty lay. With the galaxy he had always known, or with the people he had come to care for. The future was no longer just a mission. It was a battle for the soul of the galaxy itself. A new beginning. The silence that followed the activation of the mechanism was thick, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Alex stood at the heart of the Zinthar temple, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a physical force. He had just severed the most powerful link between the Zinthar and the Union, a bond that had kept them trapped for centuries. But now, the price of freedom was coming due, and Alex was beginning to feel the magnitude of what he had done. The Zinthar, standing around him in the dim light, seemed to hold their collective breath. They had lived under the shadow of the Union's exploitation for so long, and now they were free. But that freedom came with uncertainty. The milk that had once sustained not only their own species, but the galaxy at large would no longer flow. Their very survival had been tied to it, and without it, they were vulnerable. Elysia approached Alex, her shimmering skin faintly glowing in the temple's sacred space. Her eyes, usually so full of grace and serenity, were now tinged with worry. "It is done," she said softly, her voice both proud and heavy. "But now we must face the unknown." Alex nodded, his heart heavy with the same uncertainty. He had done what he thought was right. He had freed them from the Union's grasp. But what would happen now? The Zinthar had given so much for so long. Would they survive this change? The loss of their connection to the milk would change their species forever. Would they find a new path, or would they wither away? "You've given us a future," Elysia continued, her voice a quiet whisper. "But now we must decide what kind of future it will be. Without the milk, we will no longer be the same. We will need time to heal, to adapt. But we are free." Her words were bittersweet. Alex wanted to believe in the strength of the Zinthar, in their ability to forge a new path, but he couldn't ignore the immense uncertainty hanging over them. This freedom was a double-edged sword. It would give them the opportunity to rebuild, but the challenges they faced now were unimaginable. How do you begin again after centuries of exploitation? Alex asked, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. How do you find your way when everything you've known has been taken from you? Elysia looked at him with a deep understanding in her eyes. We will start by looking within. The milk was not just a resource. It was a connection to something greater than us. But it also kept us bound, kept us dependent on something outside ourselves. Now we must find our strength from within. We must reconnect with the land, with the stars, with the essence of who we are, independent of the forces that sought to control us. Alex wasn't sure how much of that was possible. The Zinthar had been bound to their fate for so long, to the cyclical harvesting of their milk, that they had been unable to forge their own path. Could they truly rebuild, or would they become shadows of their former selves, lost in the vastness of the galaxy without the one thing that had once defined them? He didn't have the answers, but as he looked into Elysia's eyes, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away from them now. The Union would not forgive him for what he had done. They would come for him, for the Zinthar, for the rebellion he had sparked. But he couldn't turn back, not when so much was at stake. "We can't stay here," Alex said, his voice suddenly urgent. "The Union will be coming for us soon. They'll want to punish us for what we've done. We need to get off this planet, find somewhere safe before they arrive." Elysia's eyes widened in realization. "You are right. They will not let this stand. The Union will stop at nothing to regain control of the Zinthar and their milk. They will come with force, with all the power they possess. But we won't be alone," Alex said, a sense of determination rising in his chest. "We have the truth on our side. We have the galaxy's attention now. We can find allies, make a stand. The Union isn't as invincible as they think." Elysia stepped forward, placing her hand on Alex's arm. "You have done what no one else dared to do. You have given us a chance. We will not forget that." As they began to prepare to leave the temple, the weight of their next steps loomed large. The Zinthar's path forward was uncertain, and so was Alex. He was no longer a part of the Union. The title of traitor hung heavy on his shoulders, and the consequences of his actions would follow him wherever he went. But as he looked around at the Zinthar, he realized that their struggle had just begun, and he was ready to fight for them. They gathered what supplies they could, preparing to leave the planet behind. As they made their way to the ship that had brought Alex to Zinthar in the first place, Elysia turned to him one final time. "We will need to build new relationships, new alliances," she said. "But it cannot be done in the shadows. We must stand tall, together, and show the galaxy that we are not to be exploited any longer." Alex nodded. "I'm with you. No matter what happens, I'll help you rebuild. Together, we can make sure this freedom lasts." The ship took off from Zinthar, leaving the planet behind. As they ascended into the stars, Alex felt the weight of his decision lift, replaced by a sense of purpose he had never known before. The Zinthar were free, but their future was still uncertain. There was a galaxy to change, and they were just beginning their fight for a place in it. The Union would come, but they would face a united front. Alex and the Zinthar were no longer victims of circumstance. They had taken control of their own fate. The war for their future was just beginning. And Alex knew one thing: whatever happened, he would stand with the Zinthar, side by side. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, and together, they would carve out a new path, one free from exploitation, one built on the foundation of unity, freedom, and hope. The stars stretched out before them, vast and endless, and for the first time, Alex felt a sense of possibility, not just for himself, but for the future of the Zinthar, and for the galaxy that had so long been blind to the price of its power. The battle was far from over, but now they had a chance, and that, in itself, was a victory.